Okay, Linda, let me launch into a little bit of discussion here on
Yep.
about trust. It's an important concept, and perhaps not readily understood. Because when you use the word trust, especially as it involves an organization or something like that, then there are certain implications that you have to realize that are being made by that word. So basically, the bottom line thought process is this: is that any time that there is risk involved, then you're involved in a trust situation. So anytime there is risk, then there's a trust. Now it may be an implied trust, it may be a constructive trust, it may be a cestui v trust, it may be an express trust. Now let me give some names of some individuals who have put out some wonderful information on trust and trust law, and then the people can go and research that. I am not an expert on trust. I know a little bit, which I'll share with you, but some of these others have done a masterful job. Go to Franco Collins, to his website. I think it's called, oneheaven.org or something like that.
Right.
And learn about the history of the cestui v trusts that have been created certainly since the 13th, 14th century and so forth. And then you might want to go and investigate the cestui v Act of 1666 from King, whatever his name was, there in England.
Right.
Which, by the way, has been updated as late as 1948, and so we use that cestui v Act in many of the things that we're doing right here in the United States, or actually all over the planet. So the cestui v Act of 1666 is an important concept, something to study. So go and study. Go and look at what Frank has done a masterful job. Then there's another individual down in Florida, a fellow named Christian Walter, and I think you can still find his information online. And anyway, Christian did a marvelous job of research and explaining many of these concepts on trust that we're working with. So go and read those things and study them. But in my own way, let me explain a little bit about trust, the structure of them, and the functions thereof. As I mentioned, anytime there's a risk involved, in other words, when the outcome is uncertain, then we're getting involved in risk, we're getting involved in the trust situation. And so the question gets to be, in whom shall we trust? Now, here in the United States, you hear a phrase, in God we trust, and people use that phrase all the time, but I'm kind of doubtful that they're really doing that. But anyway, we have these situations, that we try to deal with. So,
yeah.
So let's talk about the concept, first off, just to get it kicked off, with the concept of a cestui v trust. Now, the best example here in the United States, and probably in the United Kingdom and other places, the best example of a cestui v trust is our Social Security system. That is a perfect example of a cestui v. And there are things that can be done with that. For instance, a while back I put out a DVD on how to indenture that Social Security trust, to turn it into an express trust, which is altogether different than a cestui v. See, a cestui v is operated solely for the benefit of what you might call a beneficiary. I don't know if you really truly be a beneficiary, but for instance, the government operates Social Security system for the benefit of Elizabeth II.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. So the Queen of England owns the Social Security system here in the United States, and it's operated as a cestui v, and she's the beneficiary of it. Oh, a lot of people didn't know that.
No,
all right,
I'm sure.
So that's an example of a cestui v. Now, there are also what would be implied or constructive trust. Now, for instance, the government, our governments are continually entangling us in constructive trust or implied trust. As an example, we were kind of joking a little bit earlier about a traffic ticket.
Yep.
A traffic ticket is an implied trust because, again, what's the problem? The outcome is uncertain, so there's risk involved. So that would be another example that a lot of people are familiar with of an implied or a constructive trust. And when you go into court, you're in a trust situation. And so all these things that we involve ourselves with are because there's risk involved in their trust. For instance, our monetary system, the Federal Reserve notes that we use, bank checks that we use, credit cards, and all of our monetary system, the outcome is uncertain. So there's risk involved, you see. So everything we're doing technically is under a trust situation. All right, so let's talk about an express trust. Now, an express trust has a certain structure to it. It has the fundamental part is the creator or the grantor of the trust. In other words, that's the party that decided, hey, let's formalize this risk into an express trust. So the grantor or the creator of the trust is technically in relationship to that trust. They're God. They're the creator. Okay. Now, there are certain other foundational elements that must exist in that trust in order for there to be a trust. Number one, there has to be some asset in the trust. Now, the party who brings the value or the asset to the trust is the settlor. Now, the settlor may or may not be the creator. They may or may not be the grantor. They don't have to be. In other words, somebody can set up a trust and somebody else can bring the value into the trust. But that value is what's known as the trust corpus or the body of the trust. And without that value there is not any trust. Matter of fact, even if you have a trust running and you take all the value out of it, the trust collapses. So, probably the most powerful party in any trust is the settlor, because one of the first laws or maxims of trust is that the intent of the settlor is the law of the trust.
The trust.
Let me repeat
yes.
Okay. Somebody's talking. Somebody needs to mute out. I can hear you talking. Okay. So for everybody that's online or whatever, or if you're on the phone, maybe you can mute. So I don't hear you agreeing with me. I'm happy you agree with me, but it kind of overtalks so other people can hear it. Anyway, all right. So let me restate that. The intent of the settlor is the law of the trust, and all the settlor has to do is to express his intent, and that becomes the law of the trust. Now that doesn't, and so as we talk down about the other elements of the trust, then that is key to understand. And that's what I was trying to indicate with that a Social Security trust indenture is for the party who brought value into that trust, and who is the only party who's made any contributions to it, is the party who in fact has been making payments into that trust. So they're the settlor. They're the settlor. And once they express their intent, then that becomes the law of that trust, regardless of what the Queen thinks.
So when you look at OPPT, One People's Public Trust, they've set a trust up, but is that a real trust in the legal terms? would I'm just going to mute these people because I'm getting funny noises. Would you have to register a trust then, Winston, to make it legal and binding?
That brought the asset into it. Now, probably
Sorry, you're going to have to repeat that. I'd muted everybody, and I muted you as well. Sorry about that.
Oh,
you're
okay.
open again now.
Well, in regards to any trust,
right,
whether it be the OPPT or whatever, the settlor is the party that brings the asset to the trust. And so perhaps they are conceptualizing that all of the contributions made by the people on the planet is in fact the asset of the trust. But I have to ask the question, at what point did the settlers, the people on the planet, bring those assets into OPPT? OPPT,
right.
yeah. And so that's a real question, because again, it sounds like that some of the organizers or grantors or creators of that trust are trying to get the settlers into a contract.
They are.
Some kind of bond or something like that. And I just don't know how that's going to work out. And it really ain't in my business. But what I'm saying is that, generally speaking, the settler who brings the assets to the trust is the most powerful party within that trust, and they get to establish the trust indenture, which is in fact the law of that trust, how the assets will be handled.
So we should be saying to the people who are joining the trust, ask questions, find out before you join or sign.
Why would you want to
Okay.
commit an asset to something you don't have any idea what it is?
Right.
That don't make any sense to me.
No, that's good. That's good.
I mean, if people across the planet have assets they want to, get rid of, hey, call me up. I need a new vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, This is the whole point of the program: is people. You need to be asking questions. You need to be not going along with something that you know nothing about. And I certainly didn't know anything about how this trust was set up, and this is why I'm asking Winston, and you should be asking the same questions and actually asking the people who set the trust up.
Yeah. Now, back to the structure of an express trust itself. So we have the grantor and the creator. We've defined the what and who the settler of the trust is. We have identified the trust corpus, which is the asset. So now let's talk about the intent of the settler. What does the settler want done with the asset? And so the settler creates the trust indenture as to how the assets are to be dispersed or invested or what's to be done with the assets. Now, aside from those parties to a trust, there are also two other parties that are key to it, and that is the trustee and the beneficiary. Now, the trustee is the party who is basically the executive officer in that trust. In other words, they're the go-to guy. They're the guys that get things done. I mean, they're the ones that disperse funds. They're the ones that deals with the liabilities of the trust and all the kind of things. So a trustee is an essential part of a trust. But the trustee cannot be the creator or the settler. Because if both sides of the equation are vested in the same party, then the trust collapses. So the settler and the creator and so forth need to determine who they will choose to act in the capacity as the trustee. And certainly, if you're going to choose a trustee, it had better be somebody that you trust.
And that, yeah. So, absolutely.
Okay, now the other party that's involved in this trust setup is the beneficiary. Now, it is for the beneficiary that the trust was created in the first place. Now, it is possible that the creator and the settler could actually be the beneficiaries of that trust. They can't be the trustee, but they can be the beneficiary. And many times that's exactly what's done. Now, the beneficiary is the party for whom the trust indenture was created to facilitate something. For instance, many parents set up a family trust, and so, when the child gets to be 18, they get, their college tuition paid, or when they get to be 25, they get the, whatever the asset of the trust is, then through the trust indenture, those things are administered by the trustee. And there's other situations that are set up. For instance, let's say somebody has had a business all their life. They've run a company. They get old. They say, well, my child is only 10 years old, and so I can't really pass on the business to a 10-year-old. So they say, what I'll do is I'll create a trust. I'll put the business into the trust so that when the child grows up and demonstrates capability to run the business, then the business would be passed to them, and the trust would collapse. So there's all kinds of things, ways the trust can be used. I know a lot of people use the trust situation to avoid probate. And so we have all these things that the trust could be successfully used for, and to a good effect. But now, so let's talk about the difference between the trustee and the beneficiary, because this is going to give you some ideas, again, about some of the things we've talked about in regards to title and possession. Remember, we talked about the difference between a title to a thing and the possession of the thing.
Yeah.
And so if people want to go and study that a little bit further, if you go to the Uniform Commercial Code, to the revised Article 9, it'll talk to you about, creating a perfected security interest. And there's certain things that have to be done to perfect that interest. But because it has to do with the difference between title and possession. And so, again, we had talked about, a lien, which is a transfer of title, versus a levy, which is a permanent taking of the thing. So we get into this same thought process when we start to refer to a trustee,
right,
versus a beneficiary. You will find that the trustee has the legal title to the trust corpus. The trustee has the responsibility to the legal title to the trust corpus. The beneficiary has the equitable title, or what we would call possessory title, to the trust corpus. And so you automatically see the difference between the two. Now, it should be obvious. And we have an old phrase, that we've practically worn out over the years, which simply says the possession is 9/10 of the law.
The law, yeah.
Okay. All right. So in a trust situation, you see that from the trustee position that he has 1/10 responsibility, and the beneficiary has the other 9/10. Which would you rather be?
Well,
you know what I mean?
I